Rest in peace to all the mommies. So glad I checked. All right, you guys, we are talking about horror movies today. Finally, we are here at last. We are exploring the dead mommy girl trope in horror movies. I do not know if anybody has talked about this before. I couldn't find anything online about this trope specifically in horror, but let's get into it. Let's get started. I'm excited to talk about this. As always, we have to discuss my credentials. I am the owner of a dead mommy. This is a picture of my mom. She looks so pretty. She has a cigarette in her hand. My disclaimers are I am not an expert on the matter. I just simply have my own lived experience. Everybody can grieve in different ways. I'm going to talk about things that I feel like are portrayed well about the experience of being a young woman with a dead mom. Your experience may look different, and that's okay too. When I did some research to see if this has been discussed before, I did find an essay called Mother Deadest. It's written by Lucy Farsnick, and it focuses in particular on the dead mom trope in literature. It's basically used as like a cheap way to build characterization and empathy for the protagonist. It rarely has any development for the mother. She is seen as sort of like a tragic unknown character. Pretty much all of my examples kind of fall victim to that part of the trope, especially in the Scream movies. Maureen Prescott is one of the most unknown tragic characters of any film franchise, in my opinion. She progressively becomes more and more tragic as the movies go on until we reach the fourth one where they finally let her rest. This trope has been around for ages, as early as To Kill a Mockingbird. Scout is the OG dead mommy girl. The story of the dead mom rarely ever enters into the central storyline. So the examples that I'm giving today, the dead mother does play an important role in the central storyline. It doesn't necessarily run true for every movie that I would consider as part of this trope. So we're going to be talking about some like good examples or better examples. My personal criteria for the trope: basically, you have to have a protagonist who is a female whose mother has died, typically before the start of the film or very early on in the film. When it's done well, the movie explores trauma surrounding her grief, explores their relationship, and sets up for a resolution surrounding her acceptance of some kind of her mother's death. And it's done poorly, it's kind of thrown in there to make the character seem more vulnerable or sympathetic and doesn't really explore anything beyond that. I chose to focus on women specifically because of the final girl trope in movies. Most of our protagonists in horror movies are women anyway. My personal experience is as a young woman with a dead mommy, and so I felt like I could speak to that experience a little better than I could than the experience of a young man who has lost his mother. I think that probably has kind of its own nuances that I am not as familiar with. Light spoilers for Scream, Happy Death Day, and Talk to Me. I don't feel like you actually need to watch these movies before you watch this video unless you're the kind of person who likes to go in completely blind. I don't feel like talking about the experience of the character and their dead mother is going to reveal anything that's super important to like discover in the movie. I'm going to talk about some scenes that happen like later on and things like that. But other than that, you can still go into the movie and be surprised by what happens. First movie we're going to talk about is Scream. Scream is directed by Wes Craven and written by Kevin Williamson. Literally the dream team. It's starring David Arquette, Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, Matthew Lillard, Rose McGowan, Skeet Ulrich, and Drew Barrymore. It was released in 1996 and it's considered one of the best horror movie slashers of all time. Okay, listen, I know that I just told you that Dinner in America is my favorite movie of all time. Scream has had a much longer history of being my favorite movie. I feel a little guilty for saying that in the last video. Scream is my favorite horror movie. I feel comfortable saying that. It's iconic. It's set in a small American town called Woodsboro in California, and it follows our high school student Sydney Prescott and her friends who, on the anniversary of her mother's death, become the targets of a costume serial killer known as Ghostface. So let's meet Sydney. Sydney is the queen of the dead mommy horror girly trope. There is a line at one point where Tatum is referencing the murder from the opening scene of the movie, and she says,
"You were saying this is the worst crime we've seen in years, even worse than, well, it's bad."
Oop. Something's going on there. I like in a lot of these movies the way that it is slowly revealed that the mother has died. For each of these characters, we are going to outline what I am going to call accurate dead mommy behavior. At one point, Sydney says, it's been a year now, I just kind of need to get over it. It is such typical grieving behavior for a person to be like, it's been blank amount of time to get over it. I'm going to talk about this scene in Euphoria. Rue is a character whose dad has passed away, and she's talking about the death to a friend, and she says that, you know, she was however old when her dad died, and the person she's talking to is like, "Oh wow, it was that recent?" And she was like, "No, it was like 3 years ago." And he goes, "Yeah, so recent." That line in the show, season 2, really, really helped me a lot. I do this to myself all the time. No matter how long it's been, it's kind of time to like get over it, which is like a rude thing to say to yourself. Grieving lasts forever. A lot of people will say that it doesn't really get better, and I want to speak to that a little bit. I've seen grief described one point with this analogy that also helped me a lot. You are a box, and in this box is this little grief button, and every time the button is pressed, it feels like a really intense, overwhelming pain. When the person dies, there's this ball in the box, and right when they die, the ball is really, really big, and it's moving around, and it's constantly hitting the button, so you're feeling it all the time. And then as time goes on, the ball gets smaller, and so it's moving around the box, and it's hitting the button less often, but every time it hits the button, it feels intense and horrible. I really liked this analogy because I feel like it speaks to the fact that, like, no, it's not easier, but also, yes, it is easier. After a year of my mom being dead, the ball was still really big. It was hitting that button pretty often. And I had a lot of guilt over the fact that I felt like the ball should be smaller by now. It's been a year. If you put it in perspective, you know, I had a mom for 22 years. Not having one for only one is like a minuscule amount of time. It's been 4 years now, and the ball is a lot smaller. But, you know, when the button gets pressed, it sucks. A lot. Very, very typical dead mommy behavior on that line. I felt like that was pretty well written for a character like this. She also deals with some sexual trauma surrounding her mother's death. I think that there can be like a misunderstanding of how trauma works when it comes to grieving and death. For some people, it might not make sense why Sydney would have any like feelings about like her sexuality surrounding her mother's death. How does your mom dying have anything to do with your own like sexuality? It's a really typical response to grief and to trauma to have it seep into your life in other ways that you might not expect, especially because the way in which her mother was murdered was very sexual in nature. She's talking about her relationship with Billy, how they've been together for 2 years, and that in the first year of their relationship, they started off like hot and heavy, as Billy likes to explain. Her mom dies, she starts to feel more closed off. I really like this take on the virginal final girl trope. Final girls are portrayed as virgins, and that makes them more worthy of surviving to the male audience. So I like this sort of subversion on that trope that, you know, Sydney has a reason for being more virginal. Not that you need a reason, but it's sort of like, instead of her just being like a good little girl who deserves to live because she doesn't have sex, she is that way because of something outside of what you would normally expect for a final girl. When Sydney is talking about feeling guilty for Billy for, you know, not giving him what every man wants, Tatum goes,
"So you have a few intimacy issues as a result of your mother's untimely death. It's no big deal, Sid."
and honestly, yeah, Correct. Thank you, Tatum. Another behavior from Sydney that I think is really accurate, the way that she struggles with coming to terms with the fact that her mother was a flawed person. You know, I am not a religious person. I do not really believe in karma. Every bad person you've ever met is going to die. And when that happens, is pretty random. When a person dies sooner than expected or dies young, people have a tendency to romanticize them by saying things like only the good die young or whatever. I don't like it when people romanticize my mom. She was a flawed person and she is allowed to be, just like everybody is. At the same time, I definitely like to focus on the great aspects about her, but I am not blind to the fact that she had bad qualities as well. I think that that can be really hard for people to accept about their dead loved ones. You see Sydney struggle with that a lot throughout the, beginning trilogy, the first 3 movies. Mothers are expected to be perfect, and I think it's important that we unpack that and start to accept the fact that they, again, are just normal people who can be good sometimes and can be bad sometimes too. Next, we are talking about Happy Death Day. So Happy Death Day was directed by Christopher Landon and written by Scott Lobdell. It was released in October of 2017 and it's a Blumhouse production. So Happy Death Day is a part of a series of movies that take classic comedy movies like Groundhog Day, Back to the Future, Freaky Friday, etc., and gives them a horror twist. It follows a college student named Tree who is murdered on the night of her birthday but begins reliving the day repeatedly, at which point she sets out to find the killer and stop her death. Let's meet Tree. Tree is short for Teresa. I like that. I think that's cool. The way that the dead mommy is revealed, we get kind of an inkling of something going on very early on because it's her birthday and her roommate knows, and she kind of says, oh, I found out because I looked at your license. So we get the sense that she doesn't tell people about her birthday. She doesn't love it, even though her ringtone for some reason somehow is set to a birthday song, which is just a plot device thrown in there to alert other characters that it's her birthday without her telling them.
Of all the days of your life, what makes this day special? What gives this day meaning?
Thank you.
It's your birthday?
Kind of lazy, but whatever, I'll forgive it. We also learn that Tree is not a great person, and one thing about me, I love a complicated girl. She at one point says that she doesn't feel like her mom would be proud of the person that she is. Accurate dead mommy behavior. Number 1, we learn that she shared a birthday with her mom. I don't think you need to have her share her birthday with her mom to have it be a really hard day for her, but the reason why I like that they do that is because birthdays are like an unexpected grieving day. The people in my life sort of expect me to have a hard time on days like my mom's birthday and, the anniversary of her death. It's not as expected from the people around me, at least, that I would be having a hard time on my birthday. The day you were born is such an important moment in a child and mother's history. I always felt the need to sort of justify my grief on that day by saying things like, well, my mom always made my birthday really special, or we had a tradition or whatever. I don't feel like you actually need to have a special tradition or to share your birthday with your mom to have that be a difficult day. I think pretty much every significant day of the year is going to be challenging when you've lost a loved one. So yeah, I do like that they share the birthday just to make that connection easier for the audience members who may not be as familiar with the grief process. We also kind of explore her relationship with her surviving parent, her dad, who she has ghosted at a restaurant. He showed up to celebrate her birthday and waited for her, and she never came. Later on in the movie, she unpacks this experience by opening up to her dad about what it feels like to be around her and to celebrate her birthday and how it's really hard for her, and she feels like they're pretending that they're not grieving, and she just couldn't handle pretending anymore. I think that's really spot on. When a person you loved has died, you'll find yourself having a lot of moments pretending like you're okay. At a certain point, it becomes really tiring, especially when you're reaching, 2, 3, 4 years since it happened, it feels like there are less opportunities to be open about the fact that you're still grieving. It's really exhausting, and I can relate to Tree in this way. I think that was a great addition to her character. Last accurate dead mommy behavior that I wanted to mention. There is a scene where Tree is in the hospital and her friend Carter says that we've been trying to get in contact with your parents. It's like a one-off line, but I really like this line. I know that Tree hears that line and immediately is sent to the fact that it's not parents, it's parent. When you're a young person with a dead parent, you get a lot of people who will assume that both of your parents are alive because they have no reason to think that they wouldn't be, especially when you're like in your 20s. I often think about what it will be like when I become the age where it's no longer assumed that both of my parents are alive and how weird that will feel. Every time somebody says something like this to me, it does feel bad. Like it feels hard to hear, but it's become such a part of my identity. I am not looking forward to the day where I'm no longer special for having a dead mom. That is such Leo behavior. But, I'm here being honest. The next movie we're going to talk about is Talk to Me. It was directed by Danny and Michael Filippo. They are YouTubers. This is their directorial debut. It was written by Danny Filippo and his friend Bill Hinsman. It stars Sophie Wilde, Alexandra Jensen, Joe Bird, Otis Donji, Miranda Otto, and Zoe Terakis. It premiered at the Adelaide Film Festival in Australia, where the film takes place, in October of 2022, had its international premiere at the 2023 Sundance Film Festival, where it was picked up by A24 and released theatrically in July of 2023. This movie did incredibly well. It is the best horror movie of 2023, in my opinion. The film follows a group of teenagers who discover that they are able to contact spirits using a mysterious severed and embalmed hand, only for things to go too far. I would have loved to have my microphone holder be the hand that they use, which A24 does sell a replica of the embalmed hand on their website. It is expensive. It is sold out, I'm pretty sure. So, I'm sure that you love looking at this pretty little picture of my mommy. Okay, let's meet Mia. When we meet Mia, she is struggling with the second anniversary of her mom's death.
Please, it's my mom's Remembrance Day. I just want to forget about it.
Mia is incredibly distant from her father, pretty similar to Tree's character as well. Whenever she is seen in her home with him, the film has this bluish dark lighting. It's got a depressing vibe. But when Mia goes to visit her best friend Jade, the tone and vibe and lighting get much warmer and vibrant. She says that being around her dad is too depressing, and she seeks comfort from her best friend's mom, has become a part of their family, considers Jade's little brother to be sort of like an adopted little brother for her as well. Accurate dead mommy behavior for Mia. I like that she sort of clings on to her best friend's family as a source of comfort when dealing with her mother's loss. For me, the hardest moments of missing my mom are when I'm talking to a person who was also close to her and is also grieving her. Hearing and seeing other people experience the loss of my mom affects me really, really deeply. I can totally understand Mia being avoidant of being around her dad. It makes perfect sense to me that she would prefer to be around her best friend's family. It feels a little more comforting to be I am the one going through the grief. You all kind of knew her and get it, but you're not, but you're here for me kind of thing. But being around her dad is this different experience where it's you and I are both really experiencing this at similar levels, and that is a lot to be around. There are some characters who don't like Mia. There's a line later on where their friend Haley says something along the lines of, it's depressing to be around her, what's Mia doing here? She sucks, whatever. It might seem a little harsh to some people, but that line made a lot of sense to me. This addition made a lot of sense to me. It sucks to be around a grieving person. They are not great to be near. It's uncomfortable as hell. I gave a lot of props to the people who were around me when my mom had just passed away. You can be not the best version of yourself. I talked about this in my Courtney Love video as well. You don't really have access to all of your resources as a person, and you can make decisions that are not great. You can treat the people around you in not great ways, which we see Mia do as well. You can, also self-medicate your grief using substances, which is a major theme of this movie. And then the final thing is her relationship with her dad. Tree wants to avoid her dad because she feels like her dad is not like addressing the grief that they're both obviously feeling, whereas Mia is avoiding her dad because her dad wants to address the grief. It shows you how differently people can grieve. I feel really bad for her dad, and I feel really bad for Mia. It's a really difficult thing to do, to confront your grief, but I think necessary. I want to talk about some honorable mentions. In particular, this movie Totally Killer that just came out this past year. So this is another one of those movies that takes like the classic comedy. They're kind of doing a take on Back to the Future with this one. Our lead character's mom dies early in the film from a serial killer who was active in the 80s. The lead character goes back in time to 1987 when her mom was in high school to try and prevent the murders from happening. My mom graduated high school in 1987. If this movie came out when she was alive, she would have eaten this shit up. Oh, she would have loved it. I also have had this exact fantasy going back in time, meeting her when she was a teenager and like saying something impactful that would make her fate different. We get to see a female character interact with her mom, all of the tension and drama that comes with a mother-daughter relationship. It also explores that same tension between the mother character and her mother when she goes back in time to the 80s, which I really enjoyed. Yeah, I really like this movie. If you're interested, it's on Amazon Prime. Next honorable mention is Danny from Midsommar. So, okay, Danny is way more than just a dead mommy girl. It doesn't super fit into the trope. It doesn't really explore her relationship with her mom in particular because Danny's whole family dies right at the beginning of the movie. But it is a really, really good portrayal of grief. We get to see how to be not a supportive person in the life of a person who's grieving with Danny's boyfriend. I also wanted to mention this because Florence Pugh, yeah. Because, it's Florence Pugh. What else do you want me to say? She's just fantastic. I love her so much. She's an icon. I have her tattooed on my leg. I do. I have a Danny from Midsommar tattoo. This is one of my favorite horror movies. Again, guys, I know that I'm going to say that a lot, okay? It's the last movie that I watched with my mom, and I already related to Danny as a character a lot before I had a dead mommy. So yeah, this movie means a lot to me. Next movie I want to shout out is Smile, because guess what? Kyle Gallner. Oh, mamas, it's you. Speaking of mummies, she gave birth. This is a mother. Yeah, Kyle Gallner's in this. Sosie Bacon, Kevin Bacon's daughter, is also in this. It really focuses a lot on trauma. The death of an important person in your life can give you PTSD. Other movies that I consider on this list, we've got Thanksgiving that just came out this past year, The Boogeyman, The Lodge, The Black Phone, Halloween 2007, Hereditary. I'm looking for more suggestions, so I know that there must be more movies out there that fit into this trope. This list is available on my Letterboxd. Go follow me. I'm going to put the link in the description. Let's run through some conclusions. Grief is definitely not a new thing to be explored in horror. It's like one of horror's favorite topics to explore, but I really enjoy a movie that focuses on the specific type of grief that is a daughter grieving her mother. Mother-daughter relationships are full of interesting themes to explore. Feminist themes around trauma, grief, generational trauma, self-esteem. I think that there's still more potential. I'm not sick of it, so let's get some more. Final conclusion, I am using this trope to romanticize my life. It is a little bit helpful for me to contextualize myself in this way. I am not just a sad, traumatized young woman. I am a final girl. I have experienced something that is so intensely painful, and that makes me resilient and badass. I'm literally Sydney Prescott. She's just like me. Guys, that's gonna be it from me. Yeah, I really liked making this video. I really enjoyed looking into a trope that I feel like nobody has talked about yet. If I'm wrong, let me know. Yeah, rest in peace, Deanne. We love you. We miss you. This video is sponsored by Burly Girlies. Again, that's my band. Go and listen. Okay, guys? Ugh, guys, listen. Just listen. Just go listen. Please. Okay, everybody say goodbye. Say we love you, Deanne. Thanks. Thanks for watching.